All rise for the jury. Seated.
All right, you all right in the front row there? Okay. Just so excited to get to your seat, right? All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you enjoyed your lunch. We're ready to proceed with the evidence. All right, thank you. Mr. Sheffield.
Okay, very good. Officer Minshew, it's no longer Officer Minshew, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, if I slip into that, it's only because you're the officer on this case. Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure of before we kind of went back through some of your testimony is that prior to today, you've had an opportunity to review the report that you wrote in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You've also had the body cam video that we've been talking about, and you've had an opportunity to review that body cam video in its entirety?
That's correct.
Okay, because it runs for quite a long time after you get there. I just want to make sure that you've been able to see all of it.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Have you reviewed anything else prior to your testimony today?
The transcript.
Transcript of the body cam video?
And the video that Mr. William Bryan shot.
Okay, so you've had a chance to look at that as well?
Yes.
In preparation for today?
That's correct.
All right, perfect. One of the things that I wanted to make sure I understood is that as a law enforcement officer, you've had particular training on use of force.
Yes,
right?
we have it yearly.
As well as how to de-escalate situations.
Yes.
Okay. And so one of the things that you're doing when you arrive on the scene in this case is you are trying to make an initial assessment of what in the world has just happened here, right?
Yes.
And in this scene in particular, because there is a body lying on the ground that is bloody, and there are two men standing around it, you need to make sure that the scene is safe.
Yes, correct.
Safe for you and potentially others.
Correct.
Okay. So one of the very first things that we see you do is that you get out and you begin to try to assess the situation, right?
Yes, that's correct.
You also ask that the two men that are standing, who we now know to be Greg McMichael and Travis McMichael, that their guns are put away, right?
Yes.
Okay. And in no time did you see Travis McMichael go to the grass to try to pick up his shotgun?
No, I didn't see.
Okay.
Couldn't do that.
The issue for you also is to try to start to get a little information from these gentlemen, right?
Yes.
So you are trying to assess their level of cooperation when you're first engaging them in conversation. Is that
Yes, I'm
fair?
observing that from the beginning, yes.
Okay. And so one of the things that you will do is you will ask questions.
Correct.
You will see how they answer you in return, right?
Yes.
You'll begin to try to develop a sense of their mental state, right?
Yes.
And in this case, it was one of the things that you've already testified to is that there was a lot of pacing going on, right? Travis McMichael was doing a lot of pacing in a small area.
Correct.
Greg McMichael was doing a lot of pacing in a small area.
That's correct.
Travis McMichael actually had blood kind of covering him front and back.
Yes.
Right? Okay. You recall seeing that he had blood on his arms, right?
Yes, it was on his arms, hands, and on his head.
On his head.
Yep.
And you recall seeing that he also had some blood here on the back of his neck even.
Yes.
Okay. So this was a fairly, as you were beginning to observe it, a fairly traumatic scene that was kind of unfolding in front of your eyes.
Absolutely.
And Mr. Travis McMichael was still under the influence of that trauma.
Objection to speculation, Your Honor.
Based on your observations, he was still under the influence of that trauma.
Objection to speculation, Your Honor.
I'm not asking you to speculate what was in his mind, that he was visibly traumatized by the experience.
Let's let him describe it. It'll be easier for the court.
Well, I'm going to lead him with
determination.
cross-examination, Your Honor, and so I'm going to say to him the question that I want him to answer.
So, understanding what the basis of the question is,
Yes?
it's going to be important for the court to get an understanding from the witness,
Sure?
whether he is responding to your question or whether he's testifying to it. You can ask it either way.
Okay. I'm not asking you to guess what was in his mind, but you visually took in the way he was behaving. Is that correct?
I did.
And he appeared to be traumatized.
I would suspect that any person with a soul or a heart would be in shock. from
You
that.
heard me asking about Travis McMichael, though, right?
Yes, I heard.
Okay. He appeared to be traumatized.
I don't know what he was thinking. I was also taking in a lot of things myself, trying to figure out what had happened and what type of dangers could be around my area. That's the main thing that I was thinking of. But I did see him pacing
Okay.
back and forth, yes.
At some point, did you hear him cry out, gasp and cry out?
I don't recall.
Don't recall that. Okay. The next thing that you did is you began to then make the decision that the scene was safe enough to call in personnel to come and begin to assess the scene and to bring in ambulances, correct?
Yes, it was enough for me to go ahead and summons paramedics and other police units.
Okay. While you were on scene and around the body of Mr. Arbery, you had talked about hearing like a breath sound that you called a death rattle. That was the term that you used. And I believe your testimony is that that is the sound that the body makes after the person is deceased. It's just sort of air coming out of the lungs. Is that fair?
Yeah, from what I've always heard it as is like a death rattle, a death gurgle, referred to as agonal breathing, to where it's, from my knowledge, from what I've known while policing, is that it's when the brain doesn't have any oxygen, it's where it's a natural reaction for the body.
Okay. So it's not a sign of consciousness as you understand it.
Correct.
It's not a sign of the brain being intact and forming and making decision.
That's how it appeared, yes.
Okay. And so other than that sound of air, that agonal breathing, Mr. Arbery did not say anything or speak any words,
No, it didn't.
did not cry out that you heard.
No.
Okay. Now, you were joined by other officers pretty soon thereafter, Officer Duggan being the first one, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. You were also joined by an Officer Caitlin Roberts.
That's correct.
Okay. You were also joined by Officer Brandeberry,
Yes.
who was working with Officer Roberts, right?
Yes, that's correct.
All these people, to your knowledge, had body cam as well.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I think there was an Officer Mitchell that kept a crime scene log.
Yes.
People coming in and out of
That's
the crime
correct.
scene. An Officer Jackson who may have assisted in some way. You recall?
Officer Jackson did.
Officer Oliver, another officer there.
I don't recall her while I was on scene. I don't know if I don't remember speaking with her or seeing her out there particularly.
Okay. All right. Also, as one of your goals, once you determine that everybody is going to be safe, there's not any active danger present, you are now looking to maintain the integrity of the scene.
That's correct.
Okay. And that's where you begin to kind of rope it off with the crime scene tape.
Yes.
And just to be sure, the evidence that you were roping off in the crime scene tape was ultimately collected by Officer Ramos. Do you recall that?
I'm not sure. That was, I believe, the scene was still being ongoing whenever I left.
Okay. To your knowledge, though, Travis never walked around the scene and picked up or removed any evidence.
To my knowledge, no, and I didn't see him do that either while I was there.
Right. And never attempted to run away or flee when you were there.
That's correct. It did
Just
not.
stood in the spot and kind of waited.
That's correct.
Okay. One of the things that I wanted to make sure we understood is the video that you obtained from Roddy Bryan, Mr. William Bryan, is you said that you've watched that all the way through. That's been admitted into evidence, and I want to put it up here for just a moment. Okay?
Yes.
Hold on one second, Your Honor. This thing has got a mind of its own. Now it's leaving spots everywhere. This is what happened to the state. Yeah, it's taken on the settings of the pointer and the touch piece, so we need to have Cedric back to turn it off. Otherwise, we're just going to get stuck in the same position we were before. So we'll need to take a pause, Your Honor.
All right.
Sorry, you're welcome to sit for a minute, but
No, let's go. Let's go ahead and take a step outside of the courtroom and see if we can get this addressed, and then we'll bring it right back.
All right for the jury. Please be seated.
They're on their way.
just so the court knows, I practiced this for about 10 minutes. It was all set up and didn't touch it. So I expected this to be a Broadway quality demonstration.
Hey, something's happening where the Elmo device is starting to put dots on everything, and it's almost, it's like, see how it's got the circle up there? It's robbing the controller. The only thing I've done is try to open and close the Elmo so I can do a video, but it's putting up yellow dots everywhere. Now we're clear. Okay. Let me see if I can do it. Do you mind? Thank you so much. All right, so we're done. What first?
That's the camera system.
All right. I'm gonna
Put
do
it on
that.
the video.
Okay. Perfect.
Let's push
All right.
that's
Perfect.
you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm ready. Thank you, Cedric. Okay,
Back together.
we're ready.
Okay. You're falling off the wall. Back together. Let's go.
so I have to make out.
All rise for the jury. Please be seated.
All right, we are back on. Everybody is present. Mr. Sheffield.
Thank you. And so, Mr. Minshew, we were just talking earlier about the video that you collected from Mr. William Bryan at States Exhibit 190. I now have it up on the Mondo board. Can you see it on your screen there too?
Yeah, I can see it.
So you have viewed the initial part of this video, and I think from what your testimony was is that you have shared with us that this is Mr. Bryan behind Mr. Arbery. The jurors can't hear me. I'm sorry. I think what your testimony was that when you got this video from Mr. Bryan, that this is the view of Mr. Bryan coming up Holmes Road towards Zellwood. Is that correct?
It looks like, I believe it's toward, well, he turns around at some point. I'm not sure which direction it is now. Yeah, I'm not sure which direction it's at now because I think they turn around after this part here.
So he turns around after this part. That's correct. When he turns around, do you know what direction he runs back towards?
I'd have to look at it from, I'm not sure which direction they're going at that moment from this clip.
Okay, well, let's just play it very briefly. See him running. And then he turns and comes back the other way. You see that? And here's one more shot of it. All right, so now that you've seen that, isn't it true that Mr. Arbery is running up Holmes towards Zellwood?
Yes, that does look like towards Zellwood before he backs up, looks like it.
And then when he turns around, he's now going to be running back down Holmes towards Satilla.
Then, yeah, that direction does go back towards Attila.
Okay, very good. And you'll notice there up at the top of the road there's no car or truck in the road up there, correct?
Not in camera, no.
Not in camera. And you have no information that there was any car or truck up there at that time?
I can't see one.
Yeah, so there's not one there.
Yeah, no one told me if there was one up there or not.
Okay, very good. Now there's a phase of this video starting right about now where it kind of goes out, for lack of a better word. You can't really see anything except the bottom of the floor of the truck, right? Here's where it begins to get dropped and lowered down to the floor. Now that starts at about 0.06 seconds. Did you see that? If I go back here, 0.06, we see the turn, and now the camera goes down. Is that about right?
Looked about right, yes.
Okay. So at about 0.06 seconds, it goes down to the floor of the car. It stays down.
And Judge, I'll object to him just narrating this. If he wants to ask him a question about it, that's fine.
That's good. Let him testify. Okay. Video.
Nope, no worries. All right, now we start at 50 seconds to see a little bit of daylight again. Do you agree with that?
That's what it appears to be, yeah.
Okay. And now at about 1 minute, 8 seconds, we see the road again. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, now looking down the road here, this is heading down Holmes Road towards Satilla,
Yeah, that's correct.
okay? And where the road curves like that, we've been calling it a dog leg. Is that a fair term for you as well?
Haven't heard it before, but it does curve to the left.
Okay, where you kind of can't see the rest of the road.
Okay.
And then in a very tiny, tiny spot, you can see Mr. Arbery down there.
That's
It
correct.
appears he's sort of past the dog leg already. Past the curve in the road?
Yes, that's what
It appears that way, okay. And so just to do the simple math, it's about a minute worth of time where Mr. Arbery turns to run back up Holmes Road that we do not see what he's doing. Would you agree with that?
It looked like about a minute.
About a minute, okay. And as far as you know, is there any other video that exists of that minute worth of time?
I was not made aware of any other video.
Okay. Okay. One of the things I wanted to come back to on your testimony previously was the time period that you noted between when you heard the two gunshots and when you arrived at the intersection of Holmes and Satilla. Okay? And I want to make sure that I heard your testimony correctly. That you said it was between 45 and 60 seconds. Okay. I thought I heard somebody say something. Oh, okay. That it was between about 45 and 60 seconds between when you heard the gunshots and when you arrived at the scene.
Yeah, wasn't looking at it on the clock, but it felt like it was about 45 seconds to a minute, yes.
Meaning that where did you say you were when you heard the gunshots?
I had already went through the first intersection, and I was probably about halfway from the first intersection of Zellewood and Satilla, and Satilla and Holmes.
So halfway between Zellewood and Satilla. Help me understand that again? Let me get the map up.
Yep.
Let me just see if I can get the map up. If that's okay. There's our camera. Just do it the old-fashioned way. Do you have a bigger one? Big. Maybe a picture. Okay. All right. I'll bring this around to the jury. If you could show us where you think you were on Satilla when you heard the shot.
And Judge, may I approach just to see what's going on?
Yes, you can move around to see what is being presented.
I was around, this is the first intersection I'm referring to,
Okay?
and I already passed that one and passed several homes.
Wait, but let's do so without blocking the jury.
I'm sorry, am I blocking anyone?
I want you to bring it back this way in just a moment once we get it.
I had already went through this first intersection, and I had already passed several homes.
Okay?
So I feel like it was around this area here.
All right. Now, do you recall the address of the home that you received the call about?
The original address was 219.
220?
I'd have to go back and look at
Or you
it.
think it was 219? So here's 219, okay?
Okay.
Here's 220 right there.
Okay.
Is it your testimony that you had not reached 219, the home about the call, which brought you out there at the time you heard the shots, or that you had reached around 219 when you heard the shots?
I just remember being a window around this area.
Somewhere
here.
in there?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
So you've kind of pointed to this area, is that fair?
Yeah, it's fair.
Okay, I'm going to walk back this way, just make sure. From where he's indicated. Okay? Very good. And if you take a look at this, 219 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses away from the corner. You agree? And you're traveling, what, 4 or 5 miles an hour?
2 miles an hour.
2 miles an hour. You've got your windows open.
Yeah, back windows are down.
Back windows down. Okay. And you're saying that it takes you 60 seconds to 45 seconds to drive these 5 houses?
Felt like it took about that time.
Felt like it did. Okay. Now, you recall in your report that you wrote, you have that with you?
Not on me, no.
Okay, would you like to get it?
Yeah, please.
Okay, where is it?
I mean, do you have a copy?
I can show you mine.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
okay?
that'll be fine.
Okay, all right.
Or do you have a clean copy, Mr. Sheffield?
I don't.
Okay.
I'm going to show you my copy to refresh your memory about your report.
Judge,
Do we have a clean copy?
I have a clean copy I can provide.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I want to direct your attention to this first few lines here of the report, and just where it says, right there. Just take a look at that real quickly and see if that is on our subject.
Yes.
Okay, so in the report that you wrote, this is a report that you wrote that day?
Oh, yeah, that day.
Okay. And the reason that you do this is so that you can accurately remember what happened that day.
Yes,
That day was a stressful day for you.
obviously.
Okay. And so the basis of writing reports is so that you can memorialize all the important details that you may need to recall,
Yes,
should you be brought to court and have to testify about something a year or so later.
correct.
Okay. And in your report, you wrote that a few seconds later, I heard...
Objection, Judge, to Mr. Sheffield reading from the report, which is hearsay.
It's his statement, and I'm reading it to him. Okay.
Hold on a second. You can refresh his recollection
I
with it.
understand. Are you now recalling
Yes, I
what
read
you
that.
said about the time period between when you heard the shots and when you arrived at the 2 white males waving their arms?
That's correct.
And how many seconds was it?
I said in my report a few seconds.
A few seconds, which is definitely not 45 to 60 seconds, correct?
Yeah, well, the window for me was, with it being a few seconds, it was under a minute. It was, when you're driving down through there, it felt like 45 seconds to a minute.
It felt like that, but it really wasn't that. It was a few seconds.
Okay.
Right?
Objection
Yeah,
to
I'm not
ask
sure.
the answer, Judge.
I don't think he's actually admitted to what a few seconds is, Your Honor. It's a real simple thing, but I think I've asked him how long it was. He says it felt like 60 seconds to 45 seconds. That's fine. I've asked him, in fact, that it was a few seconds, and I think he hasn't said yes to that it was just a few seconds.
He's provided you an answer. If you want to
And your answer was?
Yeah, I wasn't looking at a clock,
Okay.
but again, it felt like a few seconds, yeah.
Okay.
It was definitely under a minute.
All right. Yes. Yes. You guys put it in, yeah, okay. So where is
It's 228, I think.
Minshew body cam? There we go. Okay. All right. I want to show you what's been admitted into evidence as states
228.
228. This is your body cam. I think you've said you had an opportunity to review that.
I have, yes.
Okay. And what I want to do is I want to play just the first few seconds of it. Okay? Now, at this moment, we don't hear any sound. Why is that?
You have a 30-second delay when you start recording. It goes back records, but it doesn't pick up your audio until 30-second mark.
Okay. And is it also the case that you don't have any dashboard camera in operation at this time?
Yes, in that particular patrol car, did not have dash cam.
It wasn't even equipped with dash cam.
That's correct, wasn't equipped.
Okay, very good. All right. Now, when you mentioned earlier that as you came to the corner of Satilla and Holmes, that there were two men waving you down. These are the two men you're speaking of,
Yes, that's correct.
and they were trying to draw your attention over to where they were standing.
That's correct.
Okay, and this is when you pull up, you find them standing in about this same general area?
Yes.
Okay?
6-7 around 58.
Now, we hear some heavy breathing. Is that you?
Couldn't tell you, I'm not sure.
Okay.
4-10-4.
Dispatch to 184 status.
Got it.
Dispatch all units, move all non-emergency traffic to channel 2.
What did you just hear Mr. McMichael say?
He said, hey, Roddy has it on film.
Okay.
All right, guys, everybody's got their weapons up, correct? Okay. Dispatch, roll a squad.
When you say roll the squad, is that when you're saying roll in the units, other units to come and do crime scene?
No, squad is emergency medical personnel.
Okay.
I'm 10-4.
Clear 10-4.
And what is it that you just heard Mr. McMichael say?
Sound like the Greg McMichael said he had no choice.
Okay.
You know where you got shot at, man? You shot on the front side, too. Okay, all right.
Dispatch 24, I need a few involved.
All right. There's the blood on the back of Travis's head that you spoke about.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay.
Negative. It's going to be a black male, middle of the roadway. Looks like about mid-20s. 136.
Do you see Mr. McMichael trying to console his son?
I see him have his hand on his shoulder.
And he says he had no choice. Did you hear that?
I heard him say that.
Okay.
Go ahead and start this way, please. Satilla Drive at Holmes Road.
Okay, so we're pausing here. One of the things that you were talking about early on is the relationship to Mr. Arbery's body, where the gentlemen were standing, and how you were coming down the road, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is it true to say that there are no obstructions, no fences, nothing that blocks a person from running across that yard as you see it here?
I don't see any obstructions in that yard, no.
Okay. And you were, as we watch this come around, no, I think I moved it forward.
Satilla Drive at Holmes Road. Satilla Drive.
Okay. All right, I want to fast forward to a spot on the video where you're speaking, and only you're speaking to another officer.
Objection, Judge. What's the relevance of, objection to relevance, I'll say that. So what then Officer Minshew was talking to another officer about.
So this is,
Hearsay as well.
okay. So this is what we were just talking about, Judge. It deals with the time of the officer's travel from hearing the gunshots and from coming in to kind of view the scene. And he is giving a statement to this officer about where he was when he heard the gunshots and how quickly he arrived on the scene. We've had some testimony about, I'm not a few seconds, yes, but I thought it was longer. This is a continuation of that correction of the testimony, impeachment, whatever you want to call it.
In that case, Judge, it was asked and answered on the stand by Mr. Minshew.
This is actually him explaining it in narrative format, which makes it even more relevant because it's not a written statement later, it's a statement at the time, and it's a prior inconsistent statement to his testimony in court, and it's a prior inconsistent statement to his response on cross-examination. And it's in response to the questions that the state were asking about the bushes being on the property or visual obstructions being on the property. So it addresses those issues, Your Honor. It's a prior statement by this officer. It's perfectly admissible.
I'm glad I've got your opinion on the record. I figured you'd say that if you're trying to admit it. I mean,
it's in evidence, Your Honor. So.
Okay.
So, Judge, I believe the proper way to do it would be to confront Officer Minshew or Mr. Minshew at this point about it, and then play this, depending on what happens when he talks to him about it.
Senator, because is somebody else also provide? Is there an officer that's engaged in a conversation?
Yes, Officer Brandenberry.
Well, he's just telling Officer Brandenberry something.
But is that officer responding?
Yes, Your Honor.
Barely. I mean, we're not offering his statement to the jury.
Let's zero in with him. Why don't you ask him if he recalls this and see where we're
Well, we have to do it. I mean, I need to play it for him, or I can actually I have his transcript. So let's take a look at the transcript. I got it. Can we approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Just get right on the
All right.
Okay, I understand what it is now. Yes. Well, let's give him an opportunity to address that, and then I understand, depending on what he says, we need to get into the video. That's fine. I mean, you're asking about his timeline, so let's get everybody zeroed back.
Are you saying I can't play this yet?
I don't remember what the last question was. So let's zero everybody
it's that
back
you
in.
were speaking to Officer Brandenberry about your observations of when you heard the shots and where you were when you heard them and how quickly you were on the scene after hearing them.
That's correct.
Okay. And so, yeah.
We have a, right past the 1037 call the house that I was looking for, they called out. I was coming right through there and I heard the shots. Took me a minute to grab what's going on. I heard the shots, I was coming through. I didn't realize what had happened until I got right there. And then, as I was coming around right by where the fire truck is, dude, when the shots went fire, and I was around that freaking bush over there coming this way.
All right, so I think what you're saying is right when the shots were fired, you were right around that bush over there.
Right.
You're literally pointing to a bush that you can see in your body cam.
Yeah, there's a large hedge of bush coming all the way across there.
Yeah, and you can see where it is right here in the frame of this video, right? You're pointing to a large bush right over here.
Yeah, it's a
You
long,
see
yeah,
that?
it's a long hedge, correct?
Right. So when you hear the shots, you're over here by this long hedge, right?
Yeah, on the other side of that.
Just on the other side of that.
Right.
And then you come right into here where you have a view of the two gentlemen waving you down and Mr. Arbery's body in the road.
Right, I came into view after that hedge, correct?
Okay, all right. So that's what we're talking
When I got around here, man, he was working the ground. It took me a minute to see, kind of see what had happened. would have called them out for it.
Okay.
And I believe that what you had testified to on direct examination with the state is that Mr. Bryan said to you that he did not recognize the people in the truck, meaning in the white truck.
Yes.
I think you testified to that. In fact, he told you he really didn't know who those people were. You recall him telling you that?
I don't remember exactly, but it was
I
today.
don't know who those people are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And at no time did he say to you that he was in communication with Travis McMichael or Greg McMichael throughout any of this interaction.
That's correct.
That there were no hand signals by Travis to go a certain direction or not.
No, he didn't mention any of that.
Okay. Thank you. Sir, I don't have anything further. Yeah.
Any additional questions?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Gall.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Roddy Bryan, I'm sorry. Yeah, we're all trying to adjust here. Roddy Bryan never told you that he tried to run over Mr. Arbery with his truck, did he?
No.
Roddy Bryan never told you that he tried to hit Mr. Arbery with his truck?
No.
Okay. Obviously, had Roddy Bryan told you that he assaulted Mr. Arbery with his pickup truck, you would not have sent him home with his truck.
Correct.
I have a few questions for you about Mr. Bryan's demeanor on the day in question. Okay? And by demeanor, you're familiar with what that phrase means.
That's correct.
Okay. Did Roddy Bryan appear to you that day to be mentally unstable?
He did not.
Did he appear to you that day to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs or other intoxicants?
No, he didn't.
Did, as far as you could see, was Mr. Bryan loud or boisterous on the scene?
No, he wasn't. He was cooperative.
Okay. Was Mr. Bryan gleeful at any point?
No.
Would you describe him as boastful or bragging at any point?
No.
Okay. Did he appear to you to be attention-seeking? Hey, look at me.
No, he didn't.
Was Mr. Bryan dropping F-bombs or spewing profanity?
No, he didn't.
Was Mr. Bryan in any way disrespectful to you, other officers, or others that you see?
No, he was respectful.
Roddy Bryan told you that Mr. Arbery tried to get in his truck, did he not?
Yeah, he did.
He told you that he was trying to get, he felt he was trying to get to the door handle.
That's correct.
And Mr. Bryan pointed out what he believed were Mr. Arbery's fingerprints on the side of his truck, behind the door.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. I know this may sound like a silly question, but I have to ask. From your observation, is Mr. Bryan's pickup truck capable of being driven sideways?
It is not.
And is there any evidence that you observed that his truck actually had been operated in that manner, that it had been moving sideways at any point?
It did not appear to be moving sideways, no.
Now, we see Mr. Bryan's truck in the body cam video. You recall that?
I do recall.
Okay. When you spoke with Mr. Bryan, did he advise you whether the truck was in the same location at the time the shooting actually took place?
He didn't say specifically, no.
Did he suggest to you that it was a bit further back from the deceased at the time of the shooting?
Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Minshew just said he didn't talk to him about the positioning of the truck otherwise.
Did Mr. Bryan suggest to you that he had moved his vehicle closer after the shooting?
No, he did not.
May I approach you with your honor?
Yes.
Sir, directing your attention to the bottom half of page 14. Bottom half of page 14.
Okay,
Now, this has been nearly a year and a half since you took statements from Mr. Bryan. Having had a chance to review the transcript of your body cam, did Mr. Bryan in fact suggest to you that he had moved his vehicle closer to the crime scene prior to your arrival?
Okay, give me one moment if you don't mind.
Yes.
I did not see that indication on here.
Do you recall asking, okay, and do you remember where you were at this point?
I can look in my transcript, but I don't remember.
Okay. Do you recall, go ahead.
Yeah. What page are we on?
We're on page 14, about 2/3 of the way down. My copy of the transcript doesn't have line numbers, or I would give that to you. It's about 2/3 of the way down.
Yes, I see. I asked, do you remember where you were at this point?
And Mr. Bryan answered you?
He says, I was back a little further than I am right now.
Yes, sir. So in fact, he indicated that he did move his truck closer.
Yeah, I just don't know at what point during he did it.
But I gather that. Would that statement to you be consistent with the quote-unquote the video of the shooting in this case?
Well, he was still moving forward during the video, traveling in the forward direction.
Yes, sir. But when the video goes off, his vehicle is back further than it is on your body cam video.
I'd have to
Objection
watch
to
it.
ask and answer, Judge.
You can go ahead. Go ahead.
I'd have to watch it, so I just don't remember.
Okay, all right. Do you recall Mr. Bryan telling you that he worked at Southern Hardware?
I don't recall.
Do you recall whether he had any known connection to law enforcement?
I don't remember him telling me that.
He certainly never worked with you.
No, sir, he did not.
Okay. You asked earlier whether Mr. Bryan told you that he called 911. Do you recall that question?
I was asked if he called 911?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I don't remember him calling 911.
In truth, you never asked Mr. Bryan whether he called 911.
I don't remember if he said he did or not, or he never mentioned that he called 911 either.
But you never asked.
I don't recall asking him, no.
Okay. And to be fair, you were already aware at that time of at least one 911 call.
Yes, I do believe that a few other calls came in during my time of travel there, but they didn't get out on the radio yet.
But you were responding to at least one call.
I was responding, yes, to a call for a suspicious person, yes.
Okay. So there was no question in your mind at that time that 911 had been called?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Bryan told you that it was quote-unquote obvious that Mr. Arbery was up to something?
I don't remember if you want to point me out to the transcript.
Yes. We'll come back to that one. Mr. Bryan told you that he had been hearing and reading about stuff going on in the neighborhood?
Objection, Your Honor. Based on rule of completeness, this wouldn't be necessary to complete what was discussed in his direct examination.
It's not, the rule of completeness isn't about whether the state discussed it in the direct examination. The question is whether the rule of completeness requires that it be brought out to complete the statement. If they had brought it out, I wouldn't be asking.
And I mean, we don't believe it's necessary in fairness, Judge.
He's asking.
Which statement is he talking about? What is it necessary to complete? Which part of it?
I thought the state inquired as to what, if any, knowledge Mr. Bryan had that day. I thought they had already gone on to that in a different way.
Well, what would he be aware of? I have no problem with the question. If it's directed at what he was aware of at the time.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Bryan advised you that he had been hearing and reading about stuff going on in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I feel like I remember him saying that that people had been getting broken into out there.
Did he advise you that it seemed to have gotten worse in the weeks before the shooting?
I don't remember that.
Directing your attention to page 28, in the middle. I believe that's right below the comment, "Welcome to the neighborhood."
Would you like me to quote it?
Yes, sir. What Mr. Bryan said.
Correct. He says, I've been here for 3 years. I've been seeing some crap go on. It's been worse during the last couple of 3 weeks from what I've been hearing and reading.
Thank you, sir. Now, did you follow up with Mr. Bryan about specifics about the crime in the neighborhood, or who knew what when? Was that your role on the scene that day?
No, sir. It was just for what we were there for, which at this point was a shooting.
Did you leave that to the investigators?
So,
Did you leave that to the investigators,
did I leave it for them?
that subject?
Yes, sir. For me, out there as a patrol unit is for scene security, and then the investigators dive deeper into the investigation.
Very good. That wasn't your role as you perceived it.
Correct.
All right. And Mr. Bryan told you that Mr. Arbery would not stop?
Can you point me to that, please? Just missed so long, I don't remember.
We'll come back to that. All right. I'm going to ask you some questions in a minute about the video, but before we get into that, do you recall Officer Roberts ribbing you or picking on you about quote-unquote relaxing in Mr. Bryan's truck?
Yeah, when she first walked up, yeah.
Something about getting in a car with her?
Objection to hearsay of Officer Roberts, Your Honor.
It's not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. It's explaining officer's conduct.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure where we're going with this, so
Okay.
let's get it back to the case. I mean, if you can tie it together, all right, but I'm not sure. I don't really understand where we're going right now.
Okay. I believe you answered earlier that one of your primary responsibilities as first officer on the scene was to secure it for your safety and the safety of the other officers.
Correct.
Okay. Is it fair to say you wouldn't be relaxing in a truck with a random stranger if you felt your safety was endangered?
Upon getting on scene, one of my first things that I do is I do scan for immediate threats, and I did not see anything that was an immediate threat at that time. And it's not uncommon for us to be, whether it's going to a home and going into people's personal space in their rooms and such during investigations, so it's not uncommon.
Okay. Well, obviously you didn't view Mr. Bryan as a threat.
No, I didn't see him as a threat.
Okay. Is it fair to say you were trying to develop a rapport with Mr. Bryan at this point?
That's what we do, yes, sir, every time we interview.
Because you get more information.
Sure.
In your defense, you advised the other officers that Mr. Bryan was a main witness.
Mr. Bryan advised me that he was a witness, and when I get on scene, whatever people are claiming to be, that's what they are.
Yes, sir.
For that time.
But in explaining the priority you gave to Mr. Bryan to your colleagues, it was because he was an important witness.
Yes, at that time.
Yes, sir. Now, about the video itself. Do you recall whether Mr. Bryan told you that he started the video because he thought Mr. Arbery was going to get away?
I don't recall exactly word for word. I do remember even asking him, was he just trying to get a identification of him?
And he told you he was?
Yes.
And why is it that he wanted to get his picture?
I'm not sure if you can put me to that quote.
Fair enough, fair enough. Directing your attention to the bottom of page 22 and the top of page 23. Oh, I'm sorry, you got it in front of you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Do you recall asking?
I will. Yeah, I will tell you now. I asked him at what point did he start videoing, and Mr. William Bryan said, "Well, I thought he was going to get away."
And you said
so that
okay.
was the reason.
Okay. All right. Did Mr. Bryan know how many videos he had?
I think he said he wasn't sure. He had several. He had a couple.
Did he tell you he had thought he started recording sooner than he did or earlier than he did?
There's a little confusion there. I think he even knew at the time exactly when he started recording.
When you and he sat in his truck, he didn't even know what he had.
Right. He said he didn't know exactly what was on there.
And he gave you the phone in his car.
Yeah, that's where we viewed it at in the car.
And you asked him if you could download it for evidence or obtain it as evidence.
Right.
And he told you sure.
He did, yes.
Okay. And you had trouble, because of the size of the file on the phone, you had trouble sending it by wireless.
Yeah, that's correct. Sending it to email.
So you asked Mr. Bryan for permission to make a second copy, a cropped copy, a shorter video.
Right.
It would be a smaller file.
That's correct.
And easier to send.
So you?
It would be easier to send.
Yes.
Okay. And he agreed to that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, at one point, I believe in the video, I think it's been shown, he told you that he had to put his phone down.
That's correct.
And at that point, he's putting both hands on the wheel.
I'm not sure what he was doing.
Okay. Did you see the wheel turning?
Yeah, we'd have to watch the video for me to
Okay.
narrate it.
Fair enough. And is it fair to say that Mr. Bryan fully cooperated with you?
Yeah, he was cooperative.
Is there anything more that he could have done for you that day?
All we expect is for people to be cooperative, and he did just that.
Okay. Now, I think you indicated earlier you did not Mirandize Mr. Bryan.
No, I did not.
And of course, he was free to leave.
Yes,
And in fact, you allowed him to leave the crime scene.
I did.
And that wasn't just your decision, that was a joint decision.
For who else?
Well, in your presence, did Officer Roberts tell Ms.
Objection to hearsay of Officer Roberts, Your Honor.
It's not being offered for the truth of the matter, sir. Whether he was in fact free to leave or not isn't the point.
Well, how about what he recalls? I understand he was free to leave.
Okay.
And this officer's understanding is he was free to leave.
Do you recall another officer also telling Mr. Bryan that he was free to leave?
I don't recall. I'd have to see, again, it's been so long. But he was not detained, which is why I didn't Mirandize him. And most of the calls that I respond to are not things of the nature of like homicide. So most of my investigations are based upon theft and shoplifting, things like that. So I usually talk to a witness, get their information, and then they're released when I get done with them. I'm not used to having to keep witnesses on scene.
Very good. Direct your attention to the top of page 35.
Okay, I'm there.
At least one other officer also told Mr. Bryan that he was free to leave. That he didn't have to come downtown.
Yeah, it looks like in different contexts, but said another officer said you don't have to come down. We don't have to follow you around. And then he said, whenever y'all tell me to go, though, I'm fixing to be right down here at 307.
2 houses down?
Yeah, that's what he said.
He said he'd be on the front porch.
Yeah, he said it'd be down at 307 Burford.
Did you search Mr. Bryan for any weapons at the scene?
I did not.
You didn't search Mr. Bryan's truck for weapons either.
I did not, no.
You didn't observe any weapons on Mr. Bryan.
I did not observe any weapons on him, no.
He was armed only with a cell phone, as far as you could tell.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, it's a phone.
Okay. To your knowledge, Mr. Bryan was unarmed at the time of the shooting.
To my knowledge, that's correct.
And again, he didn't appear pose a danger to you or anyone else on the scene.
I did not see him being dangerous to me, no.
I have a few questions about the direct examination today. Before I get there, Mr. Bryan told you that details of this incident were fuzzy to him when you were speaking with him.
I do recall that.
Okay. And in fact, he was hard to follow.
Yes, at times when he was trying to describe the directions that they went, it was very hard to follow.
Which is why you had to go back through his explanation of what happened several times.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Now, on direct examination, you were asked a question about Bryan's quote-unquote involvement in the moments before Mr. Arbery was quote-unquote gunned down. Do you remember that question?
I do.
And then you were asked to read back a portion of the transcript in which Mr. Bryan says that he blocked Mr. Arbery. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. That was page 33.
Yeah, it appears to be so.
Yeah. But in fact, as you look back over the portion of the transcript that the district attorney asked you to read, that wasn't moments before the shooting, was it?
What do you mean moments, as in what?
Well, when you're reciting what Mr. Bryan said about blocking Mr. Arbery, that description was not in the moments before the shooting, was it?
Let's see, give me a moment, let me see what happened afterwards.
Yeah.
He went on to further describe some of the things that happened afterward. But since I wasn't there to see what happened before I got there, I don't know how much the moments had passed before it happened.
Directing your attention to the 8th line of page 33 of your transcript.
Okay. Looks like Mr. Bryan says, and he came back through this way. So I went back up in here and went that way. And that's about where your video picks up when I turned around.
Okay. So all that takes place before the now famous video starts. So it wasn't moments before the shooting. It was before the video that Mr. Bryan took started. Yes or no?
Can you ask me the question directly?
When Mr. Bryan is referring to blocking at that point, that's not moments before the shooting, as suggested by the question. It was, in fact, before Mr. Bryan's video begins.
I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. To be fair, when you're directed to read a part of the transcript, you read that portion of the transcript. Am I correct?
Right.
Okay. It's not your place to correct lawyers when they ask you questions, is it?
No.
Okay. Now, on direct examination, I believe you said that Mr. Bryan attempted to block Mr. Arbery 5 times. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
You recall there's being some question as to how many times Mr. Bryan used the word block as opposed to how many times he actually did block Mr. Arbery. You recall that issue?
Yes. What was in the transcript versus how many times he actually did it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I wasn't there. So.
Well, but then you answered that in fact Mr. Bryan attempted to block Mr. Arbery 5 times?
It was stated in there approximately 5 times, different occasions.
Okay. Okay. Well, would it surprise you that a word counter reveals that the word block is used in the transcript, the entire transcript, only 6 times?
Okay.
And that 3 of those times refer to Mr. Bryan circling the block, not blocking Mr. Arbery.
Objection, Judge, to the defense testifying versus answering a question.
I'll move on.
That's sustained. Move on.
You recall filling out a police report in this case,
I did.
summarizing your encounter with Mr. Bryan that day.
Yes.
Okay. If you could take a moment and review that police report. In your police report summarizing the conversation you've been testifying to today, how many times did you report that Mr. Bryan blocked Mr. Arbery?
None.
Well, it would be 1. 1. Certainly not 5. Am I
Okay.
correct?
The way it's worded, yes.
All right. And although presented as a consistent narrative here on direct, I think you've already indicated Mr. Bryan, you and Mr. Bryan went back over the same subject matter several times.
Yes, in the directions that they were traveling.
Okay. Including at least one time in the presence of another witness in this case. And I'm not asking you which one.
Yes.
Okay. And you've previously testified that Mr. Bryan's story was confusing to you.
Yes, the directions that they were traveling in, without me looking at a map, it was hard to follow.
And you really couldn't make out exactly what he was trying to say.
That's correct.
And in fact, while you were, no, that wasn't you, never mind. So, having had time to think about it some more, when you testified earlier that Mr. Bryan told you that he blocked Mr. Arbery 5 separate times, perhaps you meant to say that he used the word block 5 separate times.
I think he used the word corner one time in there as well.
Yeah, but what you're doing when you talk about the number of times that Mr. Bryan uses this word is you're counting all the different times you've gone back over the same incident with him.
I'm not sure.
You don't think that changes the flavor of your testimony?
Well, he did mention on several different occasions blocking, and one time he said cornering him in.
As you spoke to Mr. Bryan that day, it was pretty clear Mr. Bryan didn't know how many times he did anything.
Objection to speculation, Your Honor.
I'll rephrase. Mr. Bryan never told you that he blocked Mr. Arbery 5 times or 4 times or 3 times. He never told you how many times at all.
I'd have to go back in, but it looked like there was a couple occasions where he said he cornered, and where he tried to block him off, he did.
Okay. But you never did, you never were able to tie down exactly what happened when for Mr. Bryan.
Exactly, no. It was confusing at some point on their direction of travel, correct.
All right. Last question. Rodney Bryan never expressed to you any intention on his part to physically injure Mr. Arbery in any way, did he?
No, he didn't.
No further questions.
Any redirect from the state?
Yes, Your Honor. Okay, Mr. Minshew, so we'll go ahead and watch the first few seconds of this again, okay? Because I have a question to follow up with you on.
Didn't I tell you to fill all numbers traffic jail too?
Okay, so are you able to see who this person is right here?
To the very far left,
Yes, sir.
looks like Mr. William Bryan.
Okay, and who is this person right here?
That would be Gregory McMichael.
And what direction is he walking away from?
He's coming from the direction of William Bryan in the white truck.
Okay, and what did he just say to Travis McMichael?
He said that Roddy has it on film, he has it on video.
Okay, so Mr. McMichael and Mr. Bryan were talking right before you pulled up, right?
I later saw in my camera, my video Axon camera, that while or right after I put up caution tape, that Mr. Gregory McMichael was over at the truck with William Bryan.
Okay, and that's a separate time, but here he's walking away from Mr. Bryan while you're just pulling up, right?
It appears that way.
Okay. Now, you were asked about, I think by Mr. Sheffield, about those bushes that we were talking about when you were actually clearing the intersection. Remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Can we just get an exhibit number just for the record?
Sure. This is State's Exhibit 220, the very first video clip. It is at 1 minute and 08 seconds.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Minshew, do you recognize what we're looking at here in states? You said 120? 220. Do you recognize this area here?
Yes, that's the entrance to Satilla Shores coming in on Satilla Drive.
Okay, so I'm going to play it for you, and if you can just tell us where you think you were in your patrol car when you heard the shots, okay? What road are we on right here?
Satilla Drive.
Okay. And are we still on Satilla Drive right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Probably around here, starting from there for the next few feet-ish.
Okay.
I'd probably say a little bit further.
All right.
Okay, we're in the window now. We're in the window to where I was
right
about
here?
at. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm gonna back up just a little bit. All right, do you see this house? This
Yes,
building,
ma'am.
the structure? Okay. Do you remember this structure being?
Objection. You have them on redirect.
Okay.
So leading.
I didn't finish the question, but I'll rephrase it.
Thank you.
Sure. Now, you previously testified that the subject of the dispatch call was like a house under construction?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And do you see that house under construction in this clip of this body cam?
Yes, ma'am. That's the one that's to the right there.
Okay, is it this one?
Yeah, it looks like it. Yes.
Okay. So at the point where you hear the shots, were you past this house?
I can't quite remember where I was exactly.
Okay.
I was just in that area.
In this general vicinity?
Yes, I just don't remember exactly where.
Okay. So whenever I get to those shrubs that you were discussing,
Okay.
can you let me know?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Back up.
Back up some.
Okay. That's all that landscape there.
All this right here?
Yeah, it's there's a tree there, obviously a large moss tree, but there's some type of like a large big bush shrubbery going all the way across to the road.
Okay. So at the point where your patrol car is here, are you able to see the intersection of Holmes and Satilla?
Not quite yet.
Okay. Would the people over here at that intersection be able to see you or your car?
Looks to be doubtful through the landscape.
Exactly from his perspective. Otherwise, it's speculation.
But you couldn't see anything that was going on at that intersection, right?
That's correct, I couldn't.
Okay. Now, at this point, have you cleared the bushes?
Yes.
Okay. And is this the intersection here in view?
That is Satilla Drive and Holmes Road.
Okay. Okay. Now, Mr. Goff asked you whether Mr. Bryan ever used the words run over when talking about what he did to AHMAUD. You remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And he also asked you whether Mr. Bryan ever used the word hit. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, did Mr. Bryan use the word block in? Words block in.
I do recall him using block in and corner.
Okay. And he used the word corner as well. right?
Correct.
Okay. And did he also use the words angled at him?
Yes, something at him.
Okay. Now, when you were talking to Mr. Bryan, did you know what had gone on right before you pulled up to the scene when you started talking to him?
No.
Okay. So did you know specifically what kinds of questions you were going to ask this guy?
The basic general questions, the who, what, when, why, where's, but didn't know what had happened yet, so.
Okay. So you were trying to gather information.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So essentially, were you just asking Mr. Bryan open-ended questions and let him do the talking?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you never specifically asked him if he called 911, is what you testified to?
I don't recall. I'd have to look at the transcript. I don't remember.
Okay. But you didn't specifically ask him a lot of things.
That's right.
Right? You just asked him to tell me what happened.
Yes.
Okay. And at any time, did he ever say, I called 911?
I don't recall him saying it.
Okay. So I want you to look at page 28 of that transcript, please.
I'm there.
Okay, and look at lines 12 through 14. Do you remember being asked by Mr. Goff about Mr. Bryan essentially saying that things had been getting worse over the past 3 weeks?
I do remember that.
Okay.
He did.
All right, so he said, here from lines 12 through 14, read for me what he said.
I've been here for 3 years. I've been seeing some crap go on. It's been worse during the last couple of 3 weeks from what I've been hearing and reading.
Okay, so I want you to go up to the same page, line 3, okay?
Okay.
Go ahead and read from line 3 to line 6.
Mr. Bryan said, I've been here for a little over 3 years. I was renting this house over here from a buddy of mine, and I kept trying to get my money right to buy it, and I just bought it last week.
Okay, so at the bottom, Mr. Bryan is telling you things are so bad here over the last 3 weeks, right?
Yes.
But then he still just bought a house in that community 1 week ago.
That's what it says here.
Now, you were also asked about you not seeing Mr. Bryan as necessarily a threat. You remember that?
Yes.
Okay, because you went and sat in his pickup truck.
That's correct.
Okay, but Mr. Bryan didn't try to hit you with his pickup truck, did he?
He did not, no.
Okay, he didn't block you with his pickup truck, did he?
He did not.
Okay, he didn't angle at you with his pickup truck, did he?
No.
And he didn't corner you into ditches with his pickup truck, did he?
No.
Okay. And is that why you didn't see him as a threat?
I didn't see him as a threat because I didn't see any reason to be threatened.
Okay. So, in terms of Mr. Bryan being a witness at the time when you're talking to him, as the patrol officer, is it your job to investigate whether a crime was committed and exactly what happened?
No, ma'am. The investigation is done by the Criminal Investigation Division, and as patrol units, our primary is to secure the scene and be more of a help, on perimeter checks and evidence. So we'll assist them, but that's not our primary position, no.
Okay. Is it your job to bring charges or take out warrants?
No, ma'am. We don't make those decisions.
Okay. So at the point where you're talking to Mr. Bryan, are you just gathering information?
That's correct.
For the detectives or investigators who are going to come on and pick up with the case and carry it forward?
That's correct.
Now, Mr. Minshew, if I were to ask you something at any point and you disagreed with what I'm asking you, would you tell me that?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you under oath agree to something that's not true?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So Mr. Goff asked you about your report here and how it didn't mention certain things.
Yes, ma'am.
You remember that?
Yes.
How long is your report for this case?
Page or so. Yeah, about a page.
Okay. If I were to show it to you, would that refresh your recollection?
Sure.
No, we'll stipulate to its initial.
And I'm not trying to admit anything. How long's your report?
It's about a page and a quarter.
Page and a quarter. Okay. Now that transcript that you're holding in your hand, how long is that?
52 pages.
52 pages. Okay. So is it safe to say that your report doesn't contain the entirety of what happened on that day that you witnessed on your body cam?
Of course.
Okay. Is that why you upload body cams so people can see what actually happened versus just relying on your 1 1/4 page report?
Yes.
Okay. So I got one more question for you. Do you remember towards the end of your body cam having to go back somewhere to get someone?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, most of the things that I investigate as a patrol unit, we don't have to really detain witnesses very long. We gather information, get the personal information, phone numbers, and then usually they're on their way. We make our decision fairly quickly for probable cause. This one, he went back to 307 Burford, and my supervisor at the time, the sergeant on scene, he did the right thing. Once he realized that the witness went home, he advised for me to go get him and come back to speak with investigators there.
Okay. I think that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything, well, hold one at a time. Anything on those issues, Mr. Sheffield?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Goff, on those issues?
Mr. Minshew, a moment ago when the state started examining you again, were you telling me what you actually recalled or what you thought the district attorney wanted you to say?
Which question are you referring to?
Well, I can be clear. I believe you just testified that Mr. Bryan, when you were speaking to him on the scene, referred or referenced angling Mr. Arbery several times. Do you recall just moments ago telling the jury that he was angling Mr. Arbery?
I think it was angled at him.
Yeah, angled at him. You remember saying that?
Yes.
Okay. Show me where in the course of that entire 50-page transcript Mr. O'Brien uses the word angled. Your Honor, perhaps the district attorney's office would stipulate that he did use that word, save this witness the trouble of going back through the transcript.
The court's not involved in stipulations.
Your Honor, I believe the state would like to reach a stipulation, put it on the record. I believe the stipulation would be that this witness, that Mr. Bryan, in speaking with this witness, never used the word angle or angled.
Your Honor, he used that with another investigator. That's correct.
So yeah, I see the block in the corner on these.
Just want to object to the state testifying.
Well, if it's a,
I don't need Mr. Sheffield's permission to make a stipulation.
I'm not sure that was the objection.
It's not the objection, it's the state stating that.
Yeah. Next time, if we're going to stipulate to something, let's go ahead and do that so we have some prior. I'll address that on the record once we have an opportunity to do so. I understand that that's the stipulation of the parties. You can go ahead.
So I'm not going to make you read through the rest of that transcript. You're good.
Yeah, I see corner and block so far, but I haven't gone all the way through it.
There's a lot of witness statements in this case, aren't there?
Yeah, I believe so.
Fair enough. I'm getting back to an issue that I started earlier and lost my place. Mr. Bryan told you that it was obvious that Mr. Arbery was up to something that day. Did he not?
Can you, if you don't mind, could you refer me?
Page 20. I previously referenced page 28.
Okay.
I believe it's page 20. Six lines up from the bottom.
Okay, it looks like Mr. William Bryan here says, I mean, if the guy would have stopped, you know what I mean, to find out what was going on, he obviously was up to something.
Thank you, sir. No further questions?
All right. Thank you, sir. You may step down. I understand this witness also, we are releasing today, but remains subject to recall.
Correct, Your Honor.
All right, you are released for the day, subject to recall.
All right.
Thank you.
Is it that time of day?
We can make it that time. Before we do that, ladies and gentlemen, lawyers, the court, we use words that have a lot of meaning, and I want to explain one to you. In this case, evidence in the form of a stipulation has been introduced. A stipulation is an agreement between the parties concerning some fact or facts which you as the jury are bound to accept as facts during your deliberations. You may give the facts in the stipulations any weight or credibility you determine appropriate in your deliberations. So, with that explanation of what a stipulation is, we're going to take a 15-minute recess and we'll come back for continuation of the evidence. Thank you.
It's all right for the jury.
All right, y'all can be seated. If we're going to enter into stipulations, let's do so without negotiating in front of the jury, and that way maybe we can figure out language before it is actually presented in the court, and all the parties have an understanding of what that stipulation is so that they have an opportunity to object if they need to object, and so that we don't get extra verbiage into the stipulation that would be objectionable on the record. If we could do it that way, I'm happy to address stipulations, and again, they've been charged on it, but let's try to do it in a way that cleans up the language so it's very clear what the facts are. Let's go 15 minutes. We're in recess. right, we are back on. All the defendants are present, represented by counsel. Is the state ready to proceed with its next witness?
The state was ready up until about 20 seconds ago, where Mr. Hope brought something to my attention right now. If I may have a moment.
Yeah, while they're discussing something, can I just make the record complete on an issue that involving Sophia? The objection I had to Ms. Olivier standing up and saying another witness will testify to the angle comment essentially was made. I objected on the basis that trial counsel was testifying. The court has not sustained that yet in front of the jury. I'd like to get the court to sustain that objection and cure it. That would be my request of the court.
Restate to the jury that statements made by counsel is not evidence, and go ahead and do that.
It'd be great if you said there was, something like there was an objection, I sustained the objection. We can have a record of it, and then make that curative would be great. Thank you.
So, Judge, it was the state's understanding that that was a part of the stipulation between the state and Mr. Goff, is that it was not mentioned to then Officer Minshew, but that it was mentioned to another investigator or detective in the case.
I thought the stipulation was that this witness never used that word.
So therein lies the problem with the stipulations, ladies and gentlemen. I will remind the panel that any that questions made or statements by counsel are not evidence in the case, and they should not be considered as such as they had been previously instructed. And I go back to my statement about stipulations. If you're going to stipulate, I would suggest we not do that as a negotiation on the record with the jury present and then blurt out what a stipulation is until all the parties know what the stipulation is. My preference is that they be reduced to writing so there's absolutely no question what the stipulation is, and we can proceed from there. So, I repeated what I said before the break. I will remind the panel of the court's preliminary instruction on statements and questions by counsel. All right. Is the state ready to proceed with this next witness?
Yes, Judge, just for clarification purposes. Mr. Hope just brought to my attention that one of the statements that Officer Brandon Berry will be testifying to is that a bystander came up and asked Greg McMichael, did he have a gun? And Greg McMichael said, no, I don't think so, I didn't see one. Greg McMichael then finishes that sentence with, but he attacked my son. The state's problem is, but he attacked my son has absolutely nothing to do with the knowledge of did he have a gun or not. And I think we're going to maybe get into a rule of completeness issue, so I just wanted to bring it to the court's attention that they're going to claim rule of completeness, and I'm going to say that has absolutely nothing to do with whether Greg McMichael said Mr. Arbery had a gun or not.
Okay, well, it sounds like we need to resolve the issue.
Right, and so I guess at this time, you're asking for it to be in, and I'm asking that it be held out, and I guess we need a ruling.
Let's do the basis for each.
I didn't hear you.
Let's do the basis for each.
Okay.
And the basis for the state is that it is not a rule of completeness. It's not necessary to explain Greg McMichael's statement to this bystander who simply asked, did he have a gun? And the answer was, no, I don't, I'm paraphrasing here, no, I don't think so, I don't believe he did, but he attacked my son. But he attacked my son has absolutely nothing to do with the answer of, did the victim have a gun or not? And that's the basis for it not being part of the rule of completeness. It's not necessary to explain that particular statement. It's not part of the context.
It misleads the jury if left hanging like that in this way, Your Honor. At several places, Mr. Greg McMichael says that he suspected or believed, or even talking later in the day to Officer Marcy, that he had a gut feeling, which Marcy used the word hunch, that Mr. Arbery may have been armed that day. Then we know after Mr. Arbery was shot, fell to the pavement, Mr. McMichael, Greg McMichael, pulled his arm out from under his body to see if he had a weapon in it. And at that point saw that he was not holding a weapon. So that's the full context of it. that he wasn't sure if he was armed or not, but after he pulled his hand out, he knew he was not, or at least he believed he was not holding a firearm, because that's how he got blood. Greg McMichael, got blood on himself is because he pulled Mr. Arbery's arm out to see if he was holding a firearm. And the 24-1106 says, when a writing or recorded statement or part thereof is introduced by a party, an adverse party may require the introduction at that time of any other part or any other writing or recorded statement, which, in fairness, should be considered contemporaneously with the writing or recorded statement. And then over at 24-822, that rule says when an admission is given in evidence by one party, it shall be the right of the other party to have the whole admission and all the conversation connected therewith admitted into evidence. The part at issue is when Brandeberry is talking to Greg McMichael, some other unknown, I think non-law enforcement person, bystander, has come up and can be heard on Brandeberry's body cam talking to Greg McMichael. At that point, I think Brandeberry is actually talking to Christy Rozier, who's either the coroner or an assistant coroner. And so the male speaker is talking to Greg McMichael. And the male speaker says, so the guy have a gun? And Greg McMichael says to this male speaker, not the officer, no, I don't know. I mean, I couldn't tell if it's one on him or not, but he attacked my son. And then there's overlapping conversation because Brandeberry, the officer, is speaking to Christy Rozier from the coroner's office. And Christy Rozier is saying her name, hey, Christy, coroner's office, talking to Brandeberry. And then the transcript has the male speaker still talking to Greg McMichael. Oh, really? That's in response to he attacked my son. And then Greg McMichael says, yeah, he came at him. The next line is Brandeberry speaking to Christy Rozier from the coroner's office. Yes, ma'am. And then Mr. McMichael still speaking to the male speaker. He tried to get the damn shotgun away. So either all of that comes in or none of it should, because he's not even speaking to a police officer at this point. He's speaking to some other person being recorded by the police officer's body cam. So therein lies the dispute. The state simply wants to have the male speaker asking Mr. Greg McMichael, so the guy had a gun. They want this in through the officer. And then Greg McMichael's saying, only no, I don't know, even though there's the rest of this conversation between Greg McMichael and unknown male speaker, not the officer. So our position is either none of it comes in or all of that comes in that I just read.
Final word from the state as the proponent.
Explaining to this other unknown male person that, oh, he attacked my son, he tried to get the shotgun away, has absolutely nothing to do with his knowledge with the original question, which is, did he have a gun on him? I don't know. They're not related at all, and are not necessarily put into context, especially the statement that Greg McMichael did not know whether Mr. Arbery had a handgun on him or not.
Just look at the roll.
Your Honor, just to say in further context here.
I'm going to object. I'm sorry, Your Honor. At this point, the state is going to start objecting when they want the last bite of the apple every single time.
Yeah, I've heard the arguments, counsel.
All right.
Move in, response, then move in, so reply.
not in any response, but there is one other one that's related to it. When you're ready, I'll bring it up.
So we're using the rule of completeness. It's a declaration made by one of the defendants. I guess it can be described as a self-serving declaration. Under the rule of completeness, the court's going to exclude it, having heard the arguments of counsel as presented here.
I have pages, I cannot
Can't hear you, Judge.
Okay, it's on. Under the rule of completeness, the court is not going to permit it. It being as the court understands then, what the state's argument is, I didn't hear this, but this is what I heard from the argument, that it's a self-serving declaration that's made as part of that statement. All right. Specifically under the rule of completeness, the court is not going to permit that statement under those circumstances. So I'll permit the first part of the statement. That's not saying that that statement is just completely excluded. If there's a different way of doing it, so be it. But based on the arguments presented.
Could I add to that for your consideration one other place in the transcript where we don't have an agreement here, but it's related to, it's the same topic. It's 6 pages earlier in the transcript. The state has indicated the part they plan to introduce through the officer is Mr. Greg McMichael describing what he was doing after he saw Mr. Arbery run past him while he was at his house. And they have highlighted the part, I haul ass into my bedroom to get my .357 Magnum, and then they skip a few lines and have the next thing he says, I don't take any chances. And what they skipped over, and we didn't reach an agreement pre-trial, was this, at the transcript, page 21, line 22. He says, these are the words Greg McMichael says, because we don't know if this guy's armed, because the other night, the guy stuck his hands down his pants. Now, for Bruton purposes, as we've done in other places in this very transcript, we would change we to I, so he doesn't implicate anything regarding Travis McMichael's knowledge. I mean, we'd be fine with we, but obviously for Bruton purposes, that was a concern for the state. So if it was to read, again, as the state has suggested we do in other places, changing we to I.
Do you have that page? I can just look at it.
Yes.
I'm listening to you, but it's hard to follow. It'd be easier to see it on the page.
It is counter. Oh, you have it, I'm sorry.
I don't.
Oh, I
So you
thought that the state provided all those to the court.
If I had everything parties provided to me in this case, you would not be able to see
I
it.
thought you were looking at I would not what?
You would not be able to see me.
Taller than the witness.
Your Honor, to expedite this, the state will take out the line, I don't take any chances.
Well, that's not the line that concerns me as much as the one before it, and in connection with the one we just had a ruling on.
Get me back there, because it looks like this was,
So if you go to
Closed.
page 21,
it was closed, so I thought it was open. I don't know which page it was. 21.
yeah, page 21, beginning at line 17, and I'll just wait till you got a chance to read that paragraph.
So I'm looking at highlights here. What are these highlights?
Yellow is, and I'm gonna, if I can tag Al, this all occurred while I was in the middle of my death penalty trial between my co-counsel and Ms. Dunikoski. And so if she could explain the color coding, that would help.
That would be helpful.
The yellow was the indication we received from the state as to what they intended to introduce out of these statements. The red was our indication back to the state as to what we believed should come in under the rule of completeness. The comment boxes to the right indicate whether the state agreed or disagreed. Am I saying that correctly?
No, the red was, right, and on this page there's no red, there's other red within the transcript.
All right, pink.
And the blue, so what you handed the judge is yellow and blue, I believe. So the blue was what the defense counsel wanted in as rule of completeness. The yellow is what the state was tendering in. So when, Your Honor, you look at, because we don't know if this guy's armed, because the other night the guy stuck his hands in down his pants, is what defense counsel wishes to put in to this segment based on rule of completeness.
That's correct. I had to change the ones we printed. Your Honor, the blue was very difficult to read through. So I agree with Ms. Dunikoski.
In fact, are you able to read the blue?
It's a light blue on my transcript.
Okay. We changed ours to pink.
Yeah, I'm not going to permit, there's a couple things going on. It looks like it's two separate thoughts, but then we start getting into Travis grabs, this is Greg McMichael talking about what Travis is doing. Separate co-defendants.
We didn't highlight the Travis grabs his shotgun part. We did not highlight that. We weren't asking for him to read that.
The issue, though, is it implies, but the full statement is Travis grabs his shotgun because we don't know if this guy's armed. You want to change the statement simply to, I don't know if this guy's armed because the other night. The context is lost because he's talking about Travis and the shotgun and why the firearm was grabbed. He's assuming that Travis's thoughts are because Travis had seen the couple nights prior. This is the way I'm reading it, or it can be read. A couple nights prior that he stuck his hands into his pocket, I think it was, or down his pants. And there's that interaction where Travis thinks he may have had a gun a few nights earlier. That's what this is talking about, as opposed to what Greg McMichael was doing at the time. So that's the issue I have, and I can see where I can understand where the Bruton issue comes up with that.
Yeah, and you know, just to further clarify, though, he's explaining why both he and Travis grabbed firearms, and so this actually completes the answer to why did you get your .357 Magnum, and then he adds in that the reason I got my gun is the same reason Travis got his shotgun. So it does apply to him as well.
Yeah, no, the court's not going to let it, because there's other parts of this that also, in order to give it additional context, we start getting into Bruton, because there's other, right in the middle of this, so I'll use the language in the transcript, not my language, I haul ass back to the house, back in the house, and I said, Travis, this guy's running down the street, let's go, let's go, let's go. That's quote. So I haul into my bedroom to get my .357. Talks about it being Glenn County PD issue.
Your Honor, it kind of leaves it hanging out there without context, as if he went to get his gun to fulfill this chasing and executing.
I'm working through. I'm trying to figure out how in this transcript you can start parsing that down.
You just did it, Your Honor, with the other witness. And that's the whole point of the reading it out, Judge.
Okay. The way I see it, to not solve, but to alleviate any Bruton issues, it would be to add in language, because I don't know if this guy's armed.
That was our suggestion, and I believe the state.
Well, you went into because the other night the guy stuck his hands in. That would be, that then is mixing the two together, at least to me reading the transcript.
Maybe it's the copy I gave you that's not ours, Your Honor, but, and I apologize, there's so many floating around. I really thought you had the set, but that is what we were asking for, what you just described.
Yeah, I just said, but no, what I heard was the continuation of that is because the other night the guy stuck his hands in down his pants. That's what Travis McMichael saw.
That's the explanation for why Greg McMichael got his gun. And so it's not offered for the truth of anything, it's not hearsay. It's to explain, it's to put in context and answer the question, why did you run back into your bedroom, Mr. Greg McMichael, and grab your .357 Magnum? Let's say that's a question.
Because I don't know if this guy was armed.
Well, no, because he thinks that he may be armed, because the other night his son saw him make the spurted movement.
I understand that, but yeah, no, the court will permit for completeness the explanation is because I don't know if this guy's armed. Beyond that, to me, the court, you'd have to take additional steps to make the assumptions that are being implied.
I'm trying to figure out how that puts the how it actually does put it into its proper context. Because if the question is, why did you get your gun, Mr. McMichael? And the answer that's now being allowed is, because I don't know if this guy's armed, it doesn't make any sense. Why would you grab your gun if you don't know that he's armed?
I'm assuming it will make sense with the evidence, because what I heard in opening statements is that the defense or somebody's going to get into Travis McMichael a couple nights before and what happened at the outhouse, or the porta potty, or whatever you want to call the red structure.
And that will happen, I do suspect, but I'm arguing right now about just what this next witness is going to leave the jury with, and it's not going to be accurate. It's going to be misleading. The reason it's going to be misleading is because we're not giving it its proper, complete context.
Okay. That's on the record. I appreciate the argument. Again, the court's ruled. We'll go ahead and add that in for completeness, but the rest of it, the court has already stated on the record its concerns about the balance.
It's okay, just so I don't step, unless the state's going to do it, is now cause I don't know if this guy's armed. That part's okay. All right.
Whose transcript do I have? All right.
There may be one more. The other one I'm concerned about that we mentioned, I just want to highlight, make sure the court followed me on this, is that the page 27. Oh, okay. Here it is. Sorry. This is the one you didn't have the benefit of the transcript for a moment ago, and it might be helpful. You know, it's at the very bottom of page 27. And actually, the male speaker appears all the way over. He comes up around page 26, around line 15. And from 26, line 15 on, Greg McMichael is actually talking to a bystander while Brandeberry is talking to other people. But he's close enough to Greg McMichael that he's picking him up on his body cam.
Nobody has any idea who this is?
I'm sorry?
Nobody has any idea who this person is?
I don't.
You can't, nobody even picked it up from the body cam?
It's not Brandeberry.
It's not Brandeberry. I don't know. It's if you're watching the body cam, you see a civilian walking up to the crime tape or near it, talking to Greg McMichael, but I don't know who it is. We haven't, I don't think we've got him in the case anywhere. Oh, you want me to keep going? So, as you can see, if you go page 26, I thought you were reading, I'm sorry. Middle of page 26, male speaker is up there talking to Greg McMichael, and at this point, Brandenberry's not interviewing him anymore, he's not speaking to him. And so when you get to the bottom of page 27, you should have a yellow highlight there at line 25, which indicates this is what the state wants to have Brandenberry read. And I suppose they want him to read male speaker. And so the jury's going to hear him read male speaker. And up above that, there's a section, and on mine it's pink, I'm guessing on yours it's light blue. The state wants to put in a section, and I think we did try to expand this to give further context, but it's the same problem. It's Greg McMichael talking to some other person who's not law enforcement. So, and he's not a witness in the case. So our position would be from 26, line 19, which the state and I had an email exchange over the weekend about expanding the context, all the way through page 28, line, it's wherever Brandenberry begins talking. Actually, it's going to be all of that. The next one is line, page 31, line 4. That's where Christy Rozier is talking to Greg McMichael. And she's possibly is a witness in the case, and she's the coroner. So anything from page 26, line 19, through all the way up to the page 31, line 4, where the state's going to pick it up next, should be out because it's not a law enforcement officer talking to him. I don't have that witness. You know, it's not the witness who's going to be here testifying. These wouldn't be the witness's words to Greg McMichael. It'd be some other unknown person.
If I may, Your Honor, this is just like a jail phone call. It's the statement of Greg McMichael. He's talking to some unknown person. So what if we don't know who the unknown person is? It is the statement of Greg McMichael being questioned by a male speaker. It's caught on body cam. Brandenberry is standing right there. He's watched his body cam video. He's checked it against this particular transcript. And with regard specifically to, I guess, the first thing the defense attorneys for Greg McMichael are asking for is for all this to be out, which the state disagrees with. The second thing is that I did agree that on page 26, I would go ahead and put in context that the male speaker says, I was concerned that it might have been that drunk guy that lives up here on the corner in that house on the far right-hand side. He's always walking in the road. Greg says, that one that kind of shuffles? Yeah. And Greg says, yeah, no, this ain't no shuffler. This guy's an asshole. I mean, he was hooked up when he came around the street. And then I agreed to, was he walking? And then Greg McMichael says, no, running flat out. I don't know where he was coming from down there. So these are the statements of Greg McMichael. They come in, and the state agreed to begin on line 22 on page 26 to continue this on to actually give it context over and above just starting off with, this guy's an asshole. I mean, he was hooked up when he came around that street. So that's what the state's looking to put before the jury in context. And defense contacted me over the weekend, said, can we put it in context? I said, sure, we'll add the shuffler part in without a problem. So the state's going to agree to that, to put that in context. But these are the statements of Greg McMichael. It doesn't matter that we don't know who he's speaking to. It's captured on body cam, overheard by Officer Brandenberry, who's reviewed it for accuracy, and it comes in.
Onward.
Yes, Your Honor. For the rule of completeness, just to emphasize what it should be doing, the concern is it's not that it lets in otherwise inadmissible evidence. It does do that, but that's the very purpose for the rule. And I think when the court said earlier that it was self-serving and therefore it's inadmissible, the rule of completeness, the very idea of it is evidence I could not introduce through a witness initially because it's self-serving. Say if Brandon Berry's up there and I want to get in a bunch of exculpatory stuff, I couldn't do that. Unless, under 822, it's to complete the context for the statement the state has picked out of the conversation and has introduced because it is inculpatory. And so saying, as they do, that Mr. McMichael says to the male speaker when asked, do you have a gun? No, I don't know, is out of context. It's incomplete. Yes, it would be self-serving to say, I thought, if I was doing it initially, I thought the guy was armed because of what happened the other night. But when the state picks out, no, I don't believe he had a gun, and just leaves it hanging out there out of context, the rule of completeness comes in and says, okay, it might have been otherwise inadmissible, but now it's admissible. So that's our argument. It should come in just to give the proper meaning to the words picked out by the state to use against Greg McMichael.
To the extent that this spills over on Travis McMichael, even though we're trying to be very careful about Bruton, we adopt the rule and the law that Greg McMichael's attorney is giving to the court, and would ask that the court allow a more complete statement to complete the rule.
I'm just going to read through this and see what it actually says. Let me just make sure I understand what I'm looking at too. So with these body cams, basically the reason that these have been all cut up the way they're cut up are the Bruton issues, correct?
No, sir. No, sir. That's not true. The reason they're cut up is because the state is cherry picking the parts of the statement it wants, allowing for the Bruton issue. So I've never seen defendant statements picked apart like they are, but it's like 1/10 of their statements are being put into evidence, and we're asking for the rest of the statements that finish the answers coming.
I think as far as the McMichaels go, I don't even see a Bruton problem here, but that was the concern the state had, and so we're trying to roll with it. And so that's why we're bringing up completeness, because, okay, if we're going to pick out little, as you can see, if you just look at the pages and you look for the highlighted parts, it's just little pieces here and there throughout a pretty lengthy body cam. And context is critical here. It's totally critical. And to pick out sentences like this and not give them a fuller context, which sometimes requires the whole conversation, but we can't do that. I get that.
I can take this in the back and sit down and take a look at it instead of having everyone sitting here waiting on me to read through it. I'm going to read through it, not the whole transcript, but the portions we're talking about. Come back, make a ruling on it.
I mean, just one other thing. The state actually said, hey, we're just going to play everything. And that includes Mr. Bryan's statements to Seacrest. And at that point in time, I got a no, that's a Bruton violation. We cannot waive Bruton, and we're refusing to waive Bruton. That's what I got from the defense attorneys. At which point in time, I filed a Bruton motion, and at that point in time, I asked them, what is it you don't want me to say? And at that time, they said, no, state, you need to tell us what it is you want. So this complaint now that I'm cherry picking their statements, they said, what is it you want in? And I said, this is what I want in. I sent these off to them. They marked them up. I sent back with my comments. This has been going on all of September, October. and we've now spent 45 minutes dealing with something that was supposed to be done a while ago.
I obviously read the motion. It came up in May, I think, at the motion hearing. I understood it'd be figured out amongst the parties. Sounds like it hasn't been. I'll say this, it kind of cuts both ways with this. I understand the Bruton issues. I understood that we were going to be addressing the Bruton problems in the transcripts. I'll be very candid, the way that the body cam narrative was presented through Minshew, with the way these things are cut up, makes things at times difficult to digest. That's why as I'm sitting here looking at it, I want to take a read through and make sure I understand exactly what the context is, because I'm not sure all of the context was appreciated, and I'll, again, be very candid about it. That's a double-edged sword for the parties. But the court does want the best evidence before the panel that we can get before the panel. So I'm going to take a look at the transcript and make sure I understand exactly what's going on here before we take it any further.
And Your Honor, we'll see it not only for Greg McMichael, but also for Travis McMichael. There's an extensive interview of Travis McMichael, not yet on the table. Same issue applies, and it's going to be more of the same thing that we're going to have to bring to the court's attention.
Well, this is just rule of completeness on the statements that the state is asking to present. So that's all I'm addressing right now with this witness. There are two. The one that I ruled on, I'm going to go back and think that through, make sure I understand exactly what the context is, and I'll come back with a ruling. Yes?
Your Honor, so far, I don't think Ms. Dunkowski and I have had any real issues. That could change, I suppose, but I think the lawyers are working really hard to work through these issues.
Well, I don't doubt that. But as was demonstrated by the stipulation, sometimes one person believes that they've agreed to one thing and another believes they've agreed to another. So that's the nature of the beast, which requires the court to take a recess. We just may keep everybody available over the next 10 minutes or so.
seat, please.
Hey, Amanda. Amanda, do you have the site on West V State?
Yes, I didn't have the site on West V State.
Just, yeah. Yeah, just send it to me. That's fine. Okay, we are. So let me get my mic on. Okay. We're back on. Defendant's present, represented by counsel. Took a look at this in the back. Here's what the court is going to allow. On the first issue, the court having gone back and done a little bit of research on this, we've got West v. State, which the court based its prior ruling on the incriminatory, the self-serving nature of the statement. I had to get my brain right. I'm going to cite, I've got West v. State, 200 Georgia, 566. It's an old case. But it effectively would permit even a self-serving statement to come in under these circumstances generally. So I am going to permit in the first issue, so I haul back to the house. I haul into my bedroom to get my .357 Magnum. I am going to permit the defense then to get this statement in because again, we'll keep the Bruton issue there, don't know if this guy's armed because the other night the guy stuck his hands in down his pants. Again, the court's ruling was based largely on the self-serving nature and the thought that it really wasn't necessary to explain. Giving it full context and having read through it, now I understand what the defense is trying to do, and I'll go ahead and permit that. As to this male speaker that comes out of nowhere, this mysterious male speaker that I assume somebody at some point did figure out. But what I'm going to permit is starting on page 26, starting at line 22, it brings context to what the state wants to get in on line 27. The conversation is also, I think, in full context down to the end of line 3 on page 28. So the court's going to permit then expanding what the parties had agreed to is what I understand is going on. I'm not touching the rest of the transcript and all the decisions that were made. This is simply based on what the court has read here from page 26, line 22 to page 28, line 3 in order to give context to the statement the state intends to use. Does everybody have those page and lines?
We do, and I presume since the state's calling Officer Brandenberry, they'll have a moment to instruct him to change we to I. Otherwise,
Let's go ahead and do that. Let's make sure he understands. Because I understand that is the Bruton issue that I don't want to have to go through the process of seeing if there's a waiver on that one sentence. Okay? Does the state understand the court's ruling?
Yes, Judge.
Okay. We can go ahead and inform the witness then. Just changing the we to I on the page 25, I think it was.
Yes, Judge.
No, it's not 25. I'm sorry. Sorry, 21.
What was 21?
That's changing we to I.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I instructed him, he knows that, but I will ask some indulgence on pleading in order to make sure we do not violate that Bruton situation.
I I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
I'm going to ask some indulgence on leading in order to make sure we don't violate an improvement situation.
Yeah, I don't know what you mean, but we'll see.
I understand the context of the question. The court, again, the state needs to take witnesses on direct, but the way this has been done, cutting up this transcript, I'm willing to give the state a little bit of leeway to get the witness to the points in the transcript that we need to get to that have been agreed to by the parties and which the court has now ruled upon. I think that's it. I'm not saying we get to lead the whole time, but in order to move this along and make it clear what we're doing. Okay. Okay. I understand we can now get to the witness. State ready to proceed?
Yes, Judge, the state is ready to proceed. However, we have two witnesses here. One who's a short witness, I believe. Of course, I say that. I know the danger I'm stepping into. And then we have Officer Brandon Berry, who I now believe will be probably a little longer, given it is 4:22. Would the court prefer I put up Brandon Berry, maybe going to 5:30, or would the court prefer that I put up Adam Jackson right now, who's much shorter?
So the state thinks the Brandon Berry direct is going to be an hour?
I've got 7 pages of questions, and yes, I think it may be.
That answers the question. No, let's do the short witness, and then it looks like we'll get to Brandon Berry tomorrow.
Thank you, Judge.
Do we know who that short witness is?
Yes, Adam Jackson.
Okay. Everybody ready to go on that?
So, with that note.
Let's give everybody a chance to adjust their notes. We're going to need the panel, though. Yeah. Okay, yeah, because we need to introduce the witness. Is that? Oh, is Liddell calling him in? Is the state ready?
No, unfortunately, the state needs a moment to shift for a second. Adam Jackson's body can do this, and we're not on. Go down. I got this right here. I'm finding it.
Don't blow it up.
Aye, aye, Captain, I will not.
Judge, while they're waiting, I have another one of those. Every time I get downstairs, it seems.
329.
Thank you, Judge, for that indulgence. We're now good.
Okay, stay ready to proceed?
Yes, Judge, we are. We're calling, I'll wait till the jury's in.
Okay.
Thank you.
All rise for the jury.
Welcome back. All right. Oh. Yeah, just wait for the state to call the witness. All right, we're ready to proceed with the evidence from the state.
Thank you, Judge. At this time, the state will call Officer Adam Jackson.
Swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead and have a seat.
All right, Officer Jackson, how are you?
I'm good.
Go ahead and state your full name and spell it for our court reporter.
My name is Adam Tyler Jackson, ADAMTYLER JACKSON.
All right, and how are you currently employed?
I am employed by the Glenn County Police Department in Brunswick, Georgia.
All right, and what are your current job duties and responsibilities with the Glenn County Police Department?
I'm a patrol officer, so my job duties include responding to service calls when people call, ask for a police officer, patrol, drive a marked patrol car.
And how long have you been with the Glenn County Police Department?
I started in March 19th, 2019.
Now, have you spent your entire career in law enforcement with Glenn County?
Yes, I have.
Right. And so, you've attended classes and training at the Georgia Peace Officers Standards and Training Council?
Yes, I have.
All right, so you're post-certified?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And do you have to go through a police academy, or did you go through post?
Police academy.
And have you always been in the patrol division with Glenn County?
Yes.
And what Baker are you in?
Currently?
Currently.
Currently, Baker 9.
All right. Back in February of 2020, what Baker were you in?
I believe it was in Baker 11, on the north end of the county.
Now, today you are dressed in a suit. When you are on patrol, how are you usually dressed?
In a standard police officer uniform with, at the time, there was green slacks and a tan uniform shirt, badge on the shirt, name tag.
And normally, when you're driving patrol, are you driving a marked police car?
Yes, big white police car with big police letters on the side, lights on the top.
All right. And you also wear a body cam as part of that?
Yes, I do.
So are you familiar with the Satilla Shores neighborhood here in Glenn County?
I am now.
You are now?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And what county is Satilla Shores in?
In Glenn County.
Now, had you ever been called personally to any burglaries or entering autos within the Satilla Shores neighborhood in 2019 into January, February of 2020?
No.
So prior to February of 2020, did you know Mr. William Roddy Bryan?
No, ma'am.
And prior to February of 2020, did you know Travis McMichael?
No, ma'am.
Prior to 2020, did you know Greg McMichael?
No.
All right, so I'm going to draw your attention specifically to the afternoon, Sunday afternoon of February 23rd, 2020, around 1 in the afternoon. Where were you?
I was, again, patrolling the north end of the county towards Jessup, and Officer Minshew was responding to a suspicious call, and at some point on the radio he said, "Shots fired." So obviously myself and several other officers all start heading that direction. Want to assist him, make sure he's okay, figure out what's going on. So I started heading that direction, got to the Satilla Shores neighborhood. At the time, I was a fairly new officer, so I took on a role assisting other officers, more experienced officers, with handling things at the scene. My supervisor arrived shortly after that, and he asked me to go speak to any residents, see if anybody witnessed anything or anything like that. That was generally what I was doing.
All right, so how long do you think it took you to get to Satilla Shores from where you were at the north end?
Probably 12 minutes, 15 maybe.
All right, so when you got there, were the fire trucks and EMS already there?
I don't recall if they were there or not.
All right. So in preparation for your testimony today, did I meet with you previously?
Yes.
All right. And did I have you look at your body cam video?
I think at the time we hadn't looked at it.
Okay. But have you looked at it since then?
No.
No, you have not seen your body cam video?
No.
Okay. Did I ask you to look at your body cam video and review it?
I'm not sure if we discussed that or not.
All right. So when you arrived at the scene, who was already there?
Officer Minshew was already there, and I believe that Officer Brandon Berry, he either arrived the same time I did or just within a minute or two of me arriving there.
All right. And when you got there, you were in a patrol car?
Yes.
And what did you see as far as the scene itself?
I saw there was a body in the street, and I saw a truck over to the side of the road, and I saw Officer Minshew over where the truck was.
So what was the task that you were then assigned to do when you arrived on the scene at the corner of Holmes and Satilla Drive on February 23rd, 2020?
My supervisor, Sergeant Leska, he asked me to talk to people that lived in the area, see if there were any witnesses, see if anybody had cameras that maybe faced the street, anything like that. I talked to one gentleman named Diego Perez and asked him if he had any cameras on the exterior of his home. He said he did, and that he would see if he had any kind of camera footage. He returned to me a short time later with a thumb drive memory card, which he said had video footage on it.
All right, so let's go ahead and break that down. You're out at the scene and you're tasked with interviewing witnesses. Was this a witness you picked out or someone who you got directed to?
He approached the area. I talked to several residents, but he was the only one that had anything as far as having the video footage or anything like that. So he was the only one by name that I talked to and got his contact information and all of that.
And when you located him, who was he standing talking to?
I'm not aware of him talking to anybody else.
Okay. And he offered to provide you with a USB sort of jump drive?
Yes, he had a jump drive that he said had camera footage on it.
All right. And at any point in time, did he ask you permission to go over and talk to Travis McMichael?
I don't recall if he did or not. If he did, I'm sure I would have said to stay where he was at, just, treating it as a scene. So.
All right. And with regard to the USB drive, did you actually collect that later from Mr. Diego Perez?
Yes, I did.
All right. Now, you didn't review the footage on that jump drive?
No. In a situation like that, I knew that we were going to have investigators respond, so I went ahead and just held on to that until I could give it to them.
All right. And once you obtained that USB jump drive, handed over to the investigators, what then did you do at the scene?
At the scene, I helped, we put up crime scene tape, got a crime scene log, which is just a sheet of paper where we write down everybody that's been on the other side of the crime scene tape. Got some other officers needed water, bug spray, things like that.
All right. And did you write a brief report in conjunction with the homicide of AHMAUD ARBREY?
Yes, I did.
And your body cam video, did you upload that to the system at the Glenn County Police Department?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to make sure. You haven't looked at your body cam video?
I have not reviewed it. No.
All right. Will you be able to review it overnight if I ask you to?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right. One moment, Your Honor. If you're able to watch a about 1 minute of that body cam footage, would you be able to recognize it and authenticate it as your body cam footage?
Yes.
Okay. Judge, I guess I apologize. I'm going to ask the jury to step out so we can authenticate this body cam footage.
Your Honor, we'll stipulate to its authenticity. So Mr. Goff has stipulated to its authenticity, and we have a stipulation?
So for Greg McMichael, we stipulate.
All right. At this time, the state will tender into evidence State's Exhibit 329.
No objection then from the defense.
No objection.
It's admitted.
All right. So I'm going to direct your attention to the screen right there. We're going to go ahead and look at about the first 55 seconds. All right?
Let me know what you need.
That's me.
That's your voice?
Yes, ma'am.
You
That's me.
recognize it?
Yep.
All right.
You get a witness statement from that guy who's going out to the left? Yeah. Hello, sir. Did you see any of what happened? You didn't see anything. You got video. You got video of it?
Probably have been running down here.
Okay. Can I get your name? You got your ID or anything like that?
And I can throw it on a USB.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So who's the man that we're seeing right here that you're talking to?
That is Diego Perez.
That is Diego Perez. And who is he standing next to? Do you know?
I don't know who that is.
Okay. So I'm going to also go ahead and show you I'm going to show you what's been marked as 317. And 317 and 318. So take a look at 317 and see if you're able to go ahead and recognize that.
Okay.
And is that a fair and accurate depiction of what is right there?
Yes.
All right, this time the state will tender the evidence states 317. And go ahead and tell the jury.
No objection. No objection.
No objection.
Good. Thank you. Go ahead and tell the jury what we're looking at there.
We're looking at a screenshot from my body camera footage of Mr. Perez standing near the scene.
All right. So just simply a screenshot of what we're seeing.
Yes.
And then when we look at State's Exhibit 318, right, take a look at 318. Are you able to recognize that as another screenshot from your body cam?
Yes, that looks like about where the video started when I first walked up.
All right, at this time the state would tender to evidence, State's 318.
No objection. No objection.
No objection.
All right. So with regard to 318, you had kind of parked your patrol car down a ways, right? You had
Yes.
to walk up.
Yes.
And besides interviewing Diego Perez, you did not interview anyone else at the scene, right?
No.
Okay. How long did you stay at the scene after you turned off your body cam?
Not very long, since it was a busy day. Once my supervisor got there and we started getting other calls, he asked me to leave to go take care of some of the other business in the county.
Okay. That's after you had obtained the jump drive from Mr. Perez?
Yes.
All right. All right, so I got one last question for you. With regard to the body cam video, the dates and times, are you able to explain to the jury the dates and times and how the timestamp works on body cam video? In other words, this has 1825 on it, even though it has the date of February 23rd, 2020.
Okay. Yes.
Now, obviously, 1825 is not when this is taking place.
Objection. She's testifying now. Hold up. Leading question.
Just rephrase.
All right. What time was it that you were there?
I don't set that clock that's on the camera, so I'm not sure why it's showing that date and time.
Okay, that's fine. I didn't know if you were able to explain to the jury why it shows that particular time. If you're not, it's okay.
I'm not, no.
Okay. I will go ahead and pass the witness.
Yes, sir. Afternoon, officer.
Good afternoon.
I'm Jason Sheffield. We haven't spoken yet about this case, have we?
No, sir.
Okay. Is it fair to say that you were there to lend a helping hand in whatever they wanted you to do? You had no specific role as you arrived?
Just to assist.
And you met with Diego Perez, who appeared to be eager to cooperate with you.
Yes, sir.
The taking of his license, that's just something that you do to try to document who the relevant witnesses might be.
It's just a little quicker than saying what's your name, what's your address, all that. It's all in one spot.
And it was your understanding that he had relevant information about what had been happening in the neighborhood, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Specifically, what had been happening in the neighborhood as it related to the particular incident that was unfolding in the street there at that time. I interrupted you.
Yes, sir.
You spoke too soon.
Yeah, I'm just agreeing
yes.
with you. Yes, sir.
And so he went back to his home and he produced several videos for you on a thumb drive.
Yeah, he came back with a thumb drive and I didn't review it. So.
Okay, so you're not aware of the contents.
No, sir, I'm not.
But it's, to your understanding, it is whatever the history is that's been going on in the neighborhood that may be relevant.
Yes, sir. This is a pretty standard practice. Businesses, people that have cameras in their homes, hey, do you have any video footage? And they'll, we just trust them that they're going to collect the footage that they have access to and provide that to us. And in this situation, knowing that we were going to have investigators respond, I had no reason to review it, so I didn't review that particular footage.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
No questions?
No questions.
Nothing further from the state.
Thank you. We step in.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And as I understand it, you are excused for the day, but subject to recall.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are at a good stopping point for the day. So we're going to go ahead and break for the evening. I'd like to have you ready to get started again at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. During the recess, again, do not discuss this case amongst yourselves or with anybody else. Don't let anybody discuss this case around you or in your presence of hearing. Don't go looking for any information about the case. Whatever information may be out there, again, if you pick up the news, don't pick up the news, don't pick up news feeds, social media, whatever may be there. I'm just going to ask you to step away from all of that. And again, if anybody does approach you about the case, please notify the court, and we'll go ahead and see whether we need to address that. So, with those instructions and all of the other instructions I've given you to this point, we will see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Thank you for your service here in the Superior Court of Glenn County. Have a good evening.
All rise for the jury.
you want to be seated? All right. Usually if I'm making some rulings on the fly and additional information comes up during trial, I'll just go ahead and supplement the ruling in the record, just so at some point in the future, if we have to look back at it, we can go ahead and do so, and we've got the additional sites out there. Did found a 11th Circuit case which addresses this issue of the rule of completeness under Federal Rule 106. That's going to be U.S. v. Range, 94 Fed 3rd 614. That's a 1996 case that at least updates what I gave to you by about 50 years, which may be helpful, which also cites to a 7th Circuit case, United States versus Haddad, 10 Fed 3rd 1252, which also I think is on point. So I just want to make sure all of that's in the record.
May I put another couple of cases on the record too that support the...
If you ever need to supplement the record with additional cases, I'm sure you'll find the opportunity to do that. We don't need to do it here because the court's already ruled. I'm telling you what I relied upon as opposed to what's out there. All right. Anything from the state before we recess?
Yes, Judge. During the break, Mr. Sheffield informed me that we had sent off the Travis McMichael transcript interview with Investigator Nohilly to Defense Counsel for Travis McMichael, and we received nothing back, but a kind of go ahead, it's good, is what I believed. We received no, this is a brutal violation, we received no, we're going to want this extra stuff in rule of completeness. So we were moving forward and have been moving forward, believing we were going to put up Investigator Nohilly without any issues with Travis McMichael's statement, and a lot of it comes in. I've just been informed that no, that's not the case, and that they have issues with rule of completeness. So having been down this road before, what I assume is going to happen is we're going to have Investigator Nohilly testify to all of the things that we told them we were going to have him testify to. And then they're going to get up here and they're going to ring the bell and say, well, isn't it true? He also said, and then we're going to have to be in the position of objecting that that's not part of rule of completeness, but the bell's already rung and the jury's already heard it, because my belief had been that they would give me what they believed to be rule of completeness so we could iron those issues out beforehand, because that was the direction of the court. And that is not what has happened. So we're now in a position, the state's in a position of having to bring this to your attention, that there was no meeting of the minds on the Travis McMichael statement, and that basically we're going to object at this point in time to any desire for any rule of completeness statement, simply because we have been placed in a position, an untenable position, to have not been informed as to what it was that they wanted in. And that was the order of the court, and that was what I believed your ruling to be, that we were supposed to provide them with this and they were supposed to get it back to us. And now we're going to have this ringing of the bell and this cross-examination where the defense is going to get up here and they're going to read the statement, and no matter if we object, the bell has been rung. And we're asking for a ruling on that at this time. Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. So we did exactly as the court asked us to do. We looked at the Bruton issue very squarely for an extended period of time and went back and forth with the state on the Bruton issue and submitted to them in red ink and in highlights all the things that we needed to address about Bruton, and did so in good faith and arrived then at what we thought the state was going to be offering under Bruton that would not violate our confrontation rights. We told the state, however, that as for rule of completeness, we would wait and see what exactly they put in at trial, and before we then asked questions to complete the information, we would identify what we thought needed to be heard to complete. We would share it, show it to the court, and the court could make a ruling. So the rule of completeness is a separate issue from Bruton. Our Bruton fears and concerns were about confrontation. And I think we've done an excellent job working through that issue with the state. The rule of completeness, though, Judge, is one of those things that kind of happens during trial at times, depending on what the state wants to offer. It is not necessarily a pre-trial matter. It's something that can easily be brought to the court's attention and dealt with. If the court directs me to get into what we think would complete these statements, I'm happy to do so. It's very easy, but we did not undertake that with the state, and we made it clear to the state that we were not going to undertake that with them, that we were only working on Bruton. So for that reason, I think we're in compliance, and I don't think it's going to be too complicated for these issues to come up as they do. I will simply show the state, I will show the court can rule, and we can move on. I won't ring the bell in front of the jury.
Understanding we just spent 40 minutes dealing with only 2 of those issues.
Judge, the state has elected to present its case through the statements, through an indictment that indicts 3 people as conspirators. They chose to bring this case to court in this manner. Now they want to make their case a case that potentially violates these gentlemen's confrontation rights. And so in order to do that, they must tiptoe carefully through that. We have cooperated. We have tried to talk with them and share our thoughts with it, with them, and have done so over several weeks and months to comply with that so that our clients' rights aren't violated as they try to make their case. But rule of completeness, as the court sees, is simply a way to complete the subject matter that the state has introduced. And so we don't think it's going to be that complicated. Now, if the court directs me, I'm happy to give you the entire statement by Officer Nohilly. I've broken it down into subject matter, page, and line. And when the state gets into a subject matter that we feel needs to be completed, I can bring it straight to the court's attention. But otherwise, I'm not sure what else the court would ask us to do. But I'm happy to do whatever the court wants us to do. But I don't think we violated any kind of pre-trial order or ruling.
Final word from the state.
No, that was not made clear to the state on any level whatsoever. It's Travis McMichael's statement, and neither Mr. Goff nor Mr. Guy McMichael objected to any of it. However, it was not made clear that, oh, we're going to go ahead and do this thing where we don't tell you what the rule of completeness is so that we can discuss it in advance. There's been absolutely no discussion. I've not been told one single time, by the way, Ms. Dunikoski, on page 37, we think this extra stuff should come in. The Hogues did us that courtesy, Mr. Goff did us that courtesy, but we have no idea what page and what line this is going to come in to, and it appears we're going to be spending a whole lot of time, I think, arguing over it. Because once Nohilly gets off the stand, we're going to be in a position of, okay, so on this page he said this, and then we want this in, and we want this in, and I'd put it in if I agreed to it in advance.
Well, I'm glad we stopped before 5 o'clock, because the first thing I want to do, which is the same thing I ask counsel to do anytime we're under an issue like this, let's get together and see really if there is an issue the court needs to address. And if there is, I'll go ahead and address it in context, and until I get a clear understanding of what's being objected to, there's not a lot the court can do other than vent and indicate that I will be very frustrated if we have to spend the entire day tomorrow on Nohilly's statement and back and forth about the rule of completeness. This strikes me as something that probably could have, should have been addressed well in advance of now. And my hope is that we have an opportunity over the next little bit to take a look at his statement and figure out where, if anywhere, there really is a dispute. I haven't gone through the statement. Told counsel when the Bruton issue came up to go ahead and work through the Bruton issues, and if I heard that there was a problem, to let me know. Apparently this has now been, sort of a slice of this has been taken out. This is the first that I'm aware of it, as is indicated by my ruling today on the record, on the fly, with regard to the rule of completeness. So, doing a little bit of tipping at windmills here, but hopefully by the time it gets back to me tomorrow, Nohilly's statement will have been reviewed, and I'll know exactly what I need to rule upon, if anything. So, nothing to rule on now.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay. Anything further then before we recess from the state? From Travis McMichael.
Yes, sir.
From Greg McMichael.
No, Your Honor.
From Mr. Bryant. All right. We'll see everybody at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Well, that concludes day 2 of everything that's going on. All right. Y'all be blessed. I'll see you back later.
What you gonna do now? Hope you're ready, 'cause I'm really about to put it down. Never be free, stay you. Tomorrow, but tonight I wanna stay with you. Yes, yeah, gotta make it happen. So I hope you never be alone. I don't like to waste time on stupid conversation. There's no profit in that. So if I'm around people that are always complaining with no solutions, then I'm wasting real estate in my brain for what I need to project. And what I project in my brain is what I project in my reality. So that real estate only has to be for evolution, things that are going to help me get where I got to go. You understand? Help me evolve. So if my conversation with you makes me